diabetes, unfortunately, India is known as the capital of diabetes across the world. With over 10 crores of Indians diagnosed as diabetic, with over 13 crores of Indians diagnosed as pre-diabetic, and with each one of us acutely aware of someone within our family to be having diabetes, this is a conversation that you definitely need to be part of. Namaste, I am Nutan Manohar, founder of Me, and on behalf of Times of India, I welcome each one of you to the Times of India World Diabetes Day webinar. Living well with diabetes demands a multifaceted approach. In the past, we focused on managing blood sugar levels, but now we emphasize on holistic lifestyle management. This includes proper nutrition, regular exercise, monitoring glucose levels. Additionally, mental health awareness, stress management, sleep, and consistent medical advice is significant. Education about the condition and its complications empowers each one of us to make informed choices. Combating the challenges of diabetes necessitates a comprehensive strategy that integrates physical, emotional, social, and behavioral aspects to ensure a fulfilling life despite the disease. On the occasion of the World Diabetes Day, to increase awareness about diabetes and its complications, we have with us a distinguished panel of experts who will be definitely helping us with all the doubts that we have when it comes to diabetes. Please allow me to introduce Dr. Ambrish Mithal. He's the chairman and head of endocrinology and diabetology, Max Healthcare, PanMax. He's a Padma Bhushan and BC Roy awardee from New Delhi. Namaste, Dr. Ambrish. It's a joy to have you here with us. We have Dr. V. Mohan, Chairman, Dr. Mohan's Diabetes Specialty Center. He's a Padma Shri awardee from Chennai. It's a delight to have you with us, Doctor. And we also have with us Dr. Sanjay Kalra, MD, DM Endocrinology, Consultant Endocrinologist, Bharti Hospital, Karnal, Haryana. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining with us today. Now, I have a question to each one of you. Recently, it has been estimated that India has more than 101 million people with diabetes. What could be the reason for such high prevalence? Dr. Ambrish, could I have your take on it?
Well, thank you very much for having me here with such illustrious colleagues like Dr. Mohan and Dr. Kalra. So we all understand that diabetes prevalence in India is high, but in terms of absolute prevalence, it's still not like the highest in the world. In terms of, there are two important points here. In terms of sheer numbers, it's exceedingly high, and that's because our population is so large. But that's not so bothersome. What is bothersome is the fact that it is growing at an alarming rate. The rise in diabetes, and much of this has been shown by Dr. Mohan's studies, the rise in diabetes has been truly alarming in India. I mean, when we started our careers versus now, the scene for diabetes has completely changed, and the numbers have gone up, and especially in the cities or in metros where I practice, for example, I mean, there is some data to suggest that at the age of 40, maybe 20% people may already be diabetic, and at 60, which is where many of chronic care patients come to us, we are endocrinologists. So at the age of 60, maybe 35-40% will already be having diabetes. So the fact is, it was never like that, and it's increased exponentially. Definitely, it seems to have increased in parallel with economic growth, because within the same states, you can see that there is much higher prevalence in cities versus in villages. Dr. Mohan's INDIAB study, and he'll talk about that, showed a lot about that, which he did with ICMR. But these are the fundamental changes that have happened. So number one, rising prevalence. Number two, within the same areas also, more urbanization, more economic growth has seen a greater prevalence of diabetes, greater rise in diabetes also. And the age at onset at which it happens has progressively come down, because classically, we are talking of type 2 diabetes. Classically, type 2 diabetes occurs at 30s or 40s, right? Actually 40s and 50s. But now we're talking of 20s and 30s and even younger. Why is all this happening is probably linked to the fact, obviously, it's not directly in our genes, right? Because the genes are not very different from the city to the village, and they're not so different they are from what they were 40 years ago. Yes, we may be having some genetic predisposition, but the key thing is changes in our lifestyle. And if I were to point out, and I'll leave the details to my colleagues, the changes are clearly in diet, a higher consumption of refined carbohydrate. We've always been a carbohydrate eating country, but the fiber has gone out. So refined carbohydrate, especially in urban surroundings, but not even in rural surroundings. Second is lack of protein in the diet. Definitely our diets lack protein. And the third is the fact that physical activity has gone down very significantly. When you move from villages to cities, with more urbanization, again, you become more sedentary. So all these factors, of course, and you can add stress and lack of sleep. And now, of course, air pollution. So there are multiple factors that we know, and some we may not know. There may be endocrine disruptors that we haven't really shown yet, but multiple factors that are there, and potentially very correctable factors are there. Some things that can be modified to keep this down. I think that's my broad take on increasing prevalence of diabetes in India.
Thank you, Dr. Ambrish. At this point, the question is to Dr. Mohan. Why is it that we have 101 million people with diabetes? It is part of your study. Would love to know from you. What do you think the reasons are?
Thank you, Nuthan. And I would also like to thank the organizers for having me on the show with my very good friends, Dr. Ambrish Mithal and Dr. Sanjay Kalra. Dr. Mithal has very nicely elucidated most of the reasons for which the diabetes rates are increasing. And I think he was right when we keep saying that India was a diabetes capital of the world. Actually, it was I who coined that term about 15 years ago, when we actually had the largest number of people with diabetes in the world. But subsequently, China came out with 1 or 2 studies which showed that they had higher. So technically speaking, we are still number 2 next to China. But since our population has overtaken China now this year, it is not far before our diabetic population will also overtake China. Now, the reason why China has slightly higher is because they have much older population, much more obese population, and very few youngsters. And that is why an age we know is a non-modifiable risk factor. So to add to what Dr. Mithal said, aging. Now, at the time of independence, our life expectancy was 35 years. Not that everybody died at 35 years, but a lot of children died before 1 year of age and before 5 years of age. And therefore, when you take the numerical average, it was only 35. Today, it's doubled to 70. And in China, it is 84, 85. And we are very rapidly increasing. Another 10 years, we'll also be 75 or 78 as the mean. Now, we know that age is a non-modifiable risk factor for diabetes. And so that is one. Second, when the population increases, at the time of independence, I think we had 350 million people. Today, we have 1.4 billion people. So naturally, even if you have the same percentage, you're going to have 4 times more. And today, obesity is increasing, lifespan is increasing, population is increasing. We have not even started slowing down the population as yet. It will take another 20 years before we slow down. Now, Dr. Mithal correctly pointed out about carbohydrate. We have shown that rice intake in the south and in the east, and wheat intake, polished wheat and polished rice, white rice, in the south and wheat in the north and the west, directly contribute to diabetes, because also it leads to obesity, also burns out all the insulin, pulls out all the insulin from the pancreas when you take too much of carbs. Because he rightly mentioned physical inactivity. The new one which came again from a study which we published just last week, it's been making a lot of noise, is the air pollution, which of course may not be the major one, but that can explain the difference between urban and rural. We still have, as Dr. Mithal said, the pesticides and other endocrine disruptors, which we haven't even gone there. So a number of reasons, but even potentially, if you take pollution, wear a mask and cut down pollution, one cause of diabetes you can prevent. So while all this is quite frightening, and you mentioned quite rightly 136 million people with pre-diabetes, I see it as a window of opportunity to actually prevent diabetes in those who haven't got it. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan. That is definitely eye-opening. At this point, Dr. Sanjay Kalra, could you give me your thoughts on why do you think we have such an alarming number of people with diabetes?
Thanks, Nuthan. Apart from what Dr. Mithal and Dr. Mohan have pointed out, there's another aspect, and that is stress. That's one thing I'd like to talk about. And the other thing is that we should not view diabetes in isolation. It is not just diabetes that is increasing in our country. We also have obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease. So they are all various aspects or various facets of the same disorder, which is metabolic dysfunction. So anything that we talk about, anything that we do, should not view diabetes in isolation. Now, why does stress cause diabetes? Whenever you are faced with a stress, hormones come into play, different kind of hormones, and they help you overcome the stress. Imagine, Nutan, that we have to sit for an exam, or we have to come and sit on your panel in a Times of India interview. That's very stressful. Now, if it happens once a year, that's fine. Those hormones come into play and we are able to manage for an hour or so. But imagine the same stress continuing every day, day in, day out. And that is what is happening to modern India. We speak of 70-hour working days, we speak of 100-hour working days. It is good to put in effort, but there should be entertainment also. There should be relaxation. The relaxation helps you come back to normal. I think this is something that the vast majority of our countrymen and women are missing now. Everybody is so busy working for a livelihood or working to achieve their so-called wants and needs beyond the livelihood, that their metabolism gets tired, it gets overworked, it gets overwhelmed, overburdened, and that leads to metabolic dysfunction. And one of the downstream effects that you see is poor glucose control, because these hormones that help you overcome stress, they also end up increasing glucose. So that is something we all need to work upon in our country.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay. You really pointed out about the incidence of stress, the rising incidence of stress, and how it is connected to the Indian diabetic epidemic, and also the importance of reclaiming our rest, relaxation, and sleep. So thank you so much, Dr. Sanjay. At this point, Dr. Mohan, what are the key challenges faced by individuals, patients who come to you, in maintaining stable blood sugar levels?
I think the first thing is that it's a lifelong condition. Now, the moment we tell somebody that he or she has diabetes, the first thing they think of is, oh, all my sweets are gone. And now Diwali is just around the corner. There goes my gulab jamun, there goes my badam halwa, rosagulla is all gone. So even people who have not been fond of sweets, the moment is right from Adam and Eve's time, the same problem. You tell them that particular apple, only that particular apple will come to the mind. So same thing, when you tell people don't eat sweet, even somebody is not fond, oh, that means all my life I can't eat sweets. Okay. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, when you tell them that, okay, now you got very high sugars and then you take medication, for how long is the first question. Now, if you have a fever, you can say take it for 3 days. If you have COVID, you can say you take this for so many days. If you have a headache, you say whenever you have a headache, you take it. For diabetes, a lifelong disease, what answer will you give when somebody asks you, how long should I take this medication? Because you can always say, if you reduce your weight, we can stop it and so on. But the honest answer is that it's probably lifelong. Oh, I have to take this lifelong? All my life I'm stuck with this. So these are the kind of challenges. Now I have to walk every day. I have to sleep on time. Can I travel? Can I do this? Can I do that? People think all kinds of restrictions come into their life. Actually, it's not true. You just have a little sugar and you eat little healthy. And if you actually think about it, there's no such thing called as a diabetic diet. Everything that we are telling people with diabetes, what everybody should be eating. Eat more vegetables, eat more fruits, take green leafy vegetables, cut down carbs, take more protein, add more fiber, eat healthy fats, exercise every day, go to sleep on time. These are all basic things which you're telling everyone. And you and I, even if you don't have diabetes, we should be doing it. But when you tell this to somebody with diabetes, they think it's like a sentence we are passing now. And so that is the greatest challenge. Of course, there are other challenges. People cannot afford it. Somebody needs insulin, and we are only talking about type 2 diabetes until now. Let's not forget there's something called type 1 diabetes, which comes in children, and they need insulin like 3 to 4 times a day, and they cannot afford that insulin. That's a huge challenge. Eating healthy is more easily said and done. You tell them eat fruits, vegetables. With the cost of tomatoes and onions and all that recently in the news, we know that it's very easily said, A rich person can go and buy the best of salads and best of fruit and apples and everything. But the poor person cannot afford all that. So they are eating junk food only because it's the only affordable thing that they can eat. And of course, exercise. We talk about exercise. At the same time, I used to joke that, I'm not very sure whether in a city, if you walk, your lifespan will actually get increased or reduced. More likely to get reduced. A truck can hit you, pollution can kill you, or if nothing else, a dog can bite you and get rabies, and then you can die. So we are not protected. We are not given that green protected environment with paths to walk and so on. So very easily we can say you walk every day, you do this, you do that and so on. But then that's a challenge for most people who live in slums and live somewhere else and so on. So it is for any chronic lifelong disease, these are the fundamental challenges which come. Not least of all is that the more expensive drugs which have come now are very, very expensive, the modern drugs.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan. I can understand how it feels for the patient when you ask them to eat healthy, sleep on time. It feels like a punishment for them. But the fact is, this is something each one of us have to do. So thank you so much, Dr. Mohan. At this point, Dr. Sanjay, what are the potential complications that can come out of diabetes and how can they be prevented?
The most important message, I think, is to say that diabetes per se does not cause any complications. It is uncontrolled diabetes which causes complications. So we should all be aware of that. If you keep your glucose under control, there should be no complication. If, however, it goes out of control, you might have acute or sudden complications and chronic or long-term complications. The acute complications can be like high sugar levels, low sugar levels, and sometimes the glucose levels can be so high or so low that you might become unconscious, you may not be able to respond properly to a stress, and you may have to get admitted. High glucose can lead to other complications like maybe disturbances in the salt level, in the fluid or water level in the body, and then that requires admission as well. There are other acute complications, and again I'd like to talk about the kind of complications that you see depending upon where you practice. If you happen to live in a developed city, you happen to work with literate patients, then you will see more of chronic complications. They've overcome the acute part. But if you happen to work in rural India or semi-urban India, then you will see more of acute complications. So our patients come to us with weight loss, with infections of the skin, of the urinary tract, of the genital tract, with tuberculosis, with diabetic foot. Another thing I'd like to speak about is the etiology of diabetic foot. If you happen to work in a part of the country like South Delhi or like Chennai, then diabetic foot occurs because of vessel disease or nerve disease. In Haryana, diabetic foot occurs because of rat bite. And this is something that many people will not be aware of because it is not taught in the medical colleges. So that in a nutshell is the complications. But suddenly, Nutan, you realize that we've covered the entire medicine in the past 2 minutes. So it is rightly said by our teachers that he or she who knows diabetes and its complications knows the entire textbook of medicine.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay. Uncontrolled diabetes can lead to, as you put it, all the diseases that is there in the medical textbook. So thank you so much for helping us understand that. So it becomes important for every individual to make sure that if they've been diagnosed with diabetes, that they have to control their blood sugar levels. At this point, Dr. Mohan, often people believe or like to believe that diabetes is a hereditary condition. Their parents have it and therefore they definitely have it. But we do understand that diabetes is actually a lifestyle disease where the individual's choices make a lot of difference. Could I have your point of view?
Yeah, before I do that, I think I'll add one more to Dr. Sanjay's long list, the liver. There are liver, brain, there are other organs which we didn't even think about. When we studied, they were not even there in the textbook. Now we know that the fatty liver leads to diabetes, diabetes leads to fatty liver, diabetes leads to dementia, Alzheimer's. So lots of new things coming from head to foot, including the head and the foot. Diabetes doesn't leave any part of the body. And now coming to hereditary versus lifestyle, I think there's an old analogy that we used to say, which is true even today. We used to say that to shoot a gun, you have to have a gun, you have to have a bullet inside, but that's not enough. Somebody has to pull the trigger as well. Only then the bullet comes out. Similarly, the bullet in this case, in diabetes case, is the hereditary factor. So if you have father and mother having diabetes, Dr. Mithal mentioned earlier that by age 50, 60, 35, 40% have diabetes. If both your parents have diabetes, both having diabetes, and you're age 50 and you're an Indian, I would like to count how many don't have diabetes. at that age group. It will be like more than 90%, 95% have it. So it's almost certain that if both parents have diabetes, the prevalence of diabetes is very high in the children. Very few escape actually. If one parent has it, it comes down to half. So your chance, if you have 4 siblings, let's say, or totally 4 in your generation, 2 may get, 2 may not get. Although we don't know who are those 2, maybe the ones who are obese will get it faster and so on. Having said that, like the bullet alone being inside, if you keep it away in a cupboard, it's not going to shoot by itself, isn't it? So similarly, what pulls the trigger? What pulls the trigger is the environmental factors. Now, these are the ones which Dr. Mithal said earlier, and we all contributed, Sanjay and I contributed, Nutan, and that is obesity stands number 1. Physical inactivity comes there. Then excess carbohydrate intake and excess calorie intake, which actually leads to overweight. These are the main ones. But then lack of sleep, stress, which Sanjay very beautifully mentioned, and many other factors. Now, as we said, the pollution and so on. Now, these are all the environmental factors, and these are lifestyle factors. So the one in our hand is that we eat healthy. Every day when we sit in front of when you have a table, have a plate in front of us, see that we have more protein and more fiber, and if possible more vegetarian food, vegetables and fruits and so on, and less of the red meat and less particularly of the refined carbohydrates like rice and wheat. If you just make that one little change, it goes a huge way in preventing diabetes itself. You can probably postpone diabetes by 10-20 years. If you now add on physical activity to that, every day you do physical activity, on top of that you do little yoga and pranayama, because the mind plays a very big role. The stress which Dr. Sanjay was talking about, that you can definitely reduce by doing pranayama, meditation, yoga and so on. So these environmental factors actually give us hope that you can prevent diabetes. If you didn't have environmental factors, only hereditary, you are doomed to get it, and there's nothing you can do about it. So even those who have a strong family history of diabetes, if you postpone it by 10-20 years by active lifestyle modification, that changes your life.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan. Dr. Sanjay, Dr. Mohan had spoken briefly about dietary changes. Would love to have you elaborate on dietary changes and why is that crucial for managing diabetes, particularly in the Indian context where we tend to eat a lot of carbs.
Actually, you see, Nutan, it's not our fault that our food is so tasty. Indian food is the tastiest in the world. Our spices, our salts, our sugars, they are so tasty. I mean, it's not our fault. It's not our patient's fault. But still, there is a lot you can do while remaining within the confines of Indian cuisine, of the Indian kitchen. So let's just go stepwise. The first is procurement. Where do you buy your food from? Try to buy fresh food, unprocessed food. If you were to go back to your grandmother's time, you would see that most of the money spent on food would come from the market, the open air market. Speaking in Hindi, the sabji mandi, the fruit mandi, the anaj mandi. That means the fruit market, the vegetable market, and the cereal market, where you would buy maybe wheat or rice from. But now when you give money to your children, first of all, you have to add a couple of zeros to the rupees. Only then can they buy something. Now they tend to go to shops where they get processed or ultra processed foods. So they will go to the fast food shop, to the bakery, and they'll buy food which is processed, which comes in tins or cans or maybe in plastic covering. So first of all, procurement. Try to buy unprocessed food, fresh food. The second P would be preparation. How do you prepare? So try to learn healthy ways of cooking. Maybe more of boiling, more of sauteing, and less of deep frying. The third P would be pattern. What kind of a pattern do we follow? Now there are so many fad diets in vogue, but the most sensible for anybody with type 2 diabetes would be a 3+3 meal pattern. If you can manage that, that is small frequent meals. 3+3 means 3 major meals and 3 minor meals or 3 snacks in a day. The fourth P would be the plating order. In what order do you eat? So first, we should go for fluids and fiber. Drink water or buttermilk, then maybe take salads. That's the first thing. Then you go on to a high protein part of your diet, which can be eggs or meat or fish or lentils. And at the end, you can consume carbohydrates. If you follow this plating order or this order of eating, this sequencing, it actually reduces the insulin load on the body and it prevents glucose from rising. It also gives you more satiety. You feel happy. And the last P, we shouldn't forget, that's the portion size. So everything should be in moderation. Try to eat within limits.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay. The P's are fantastic. Personally, I might struggle with the portion control because, as you rightly mentioned, it's a very delicious meal. But thank you so much for giving us insights on how we should plate, because that is something often we forget and we start with carbs. So thank you so much, Dr. Sanjay. At this point, Dr. Ambrish, how does regular exercise contribute to living well with diabetes? And people often speak about the number of steps that needs to be taken in a day. So is there any truth to that?
Yes, exercise plays a very important role in managing or preventing diabetes. So I think we have to look at diabetes as a marker of overall health. Diabetes, we sometimes just think of it as blood sugar. Actually, diabetes means often you have blood pressure, you have cholesterol. As my friend said, you're overweight. You may have a fatty liver. You have a greater risk of even osteoporosis these days. We are saying that. So what I'm trying to say is that when you're looking at the benefits of exercise, you should not limit those benefits just to getting the blood glucose level down. The benefits of exercise are way beyond that. Yes, certainly regular physical activity. I mean, there are guidelines, 150 to 180 minutes per week of aerobic exercise is probably the best for you. But we also know that it's not just aerobic exercise. Strength training should be added maybe twice a week to help improve insulin resistance or reduce insulin resistance. We also know, as already mentioned, that adding exercises which have a blend of breathing and relaxation, like yoga related exercises, they play a big role. So you have to choose and mix these exercises. Now, one of the things about exercises, but you have to give yourself that about 40 minutes every day for physical activity. And in addition, of course, you must walk around, not avoid taking the elevator unless you're climbing up 10 floors or something. As far as possible, wherever you get a chance, you should walk. When you are in a sitting job, like all of us are, it's very important to follow the Pomodoro technique, where you can get up from your seat every 25-30 minutes, walk for a few minutes, just go to the next desk or the next room, or ask your nutritionist something, ask your colleague something, and then come back to your desk. So that's very important. So even if you're doing that 30-40 minutes in the morning and you're then sitting all day, that's not good enough. I mean, you have to get up, you have to avoid prolonged sitting. And to use a cliche, WHO says sitting is a new smoking. So in urban life, sitting is a big problem. So I think some activity after dinner is very important. It could be just you go to the colony gate or go to the next listing, or even go up and down in your house, to the higher floor and just have a look. So some degree of physical activity after meals really helps in controlling blood glucose. One important question is, people ask, what is best for me? Now, you have to make your choice, because physical activity should also be a de-stressor. And I find that people who are doing physical activity like crazy, just to prove a point to themselves or to others, are not really happy people. So your activity, your exercise that you choose should be the one that you enjoy. So somebody likes group activities, they go for aerobics, and you say, no, you do the treadmill alone. That's not good. If someone likes long walks and you say, no, you should do, with a trainer at home. So you have to see what gels with that person. So whenever a patient asks me what exercise is best for me, I tell them a mix of these, but please choose what you want. If you enjoy playing badminton, no need to worry about walking. Exercise has multiple benefits, including now benefits on Alzheimer's and dementia, and all those things are related to exercise. So no two ways about it. It helps in every way.
So exercise is not just for diabetes, but it's for overall health, and it has very many preventive and curative properties. So thank you so much, Dr. Ambrish, for that. At this point, Dr. Sanjay, we come back to the point that we have discussed earlier, and a very important point, and that is about stress in India. How does stress impact diabetes management, and what are the coping strategies that you recommend for your patients?
So we had begun speaking about this earlier. Let me complete the explanation about why stress worsens diabetes. When you have stress, various stress hormones come into play. They come from the gland known as the adrenal gland. Now, the adrenal gland is a very small gland. It weighs just 3 grams on each side, only 3 grams. So a total of 6 grams, but this runs the entire body. And we have hormones known as the fight, flight, fright hormones. So imagine a lion running after you, or imagine you getting late for your work. You begin to run. These fight, flight hormones come in and they increase glucose levels. This is an adaptive mechanism because if you don't have glucose, your muscles will not get energy, then they won't be able to run. So either the lion will eat you up or you will get late for work and your boss will eat you up. So it's an adaptive mechanism. And if you happen to appear for a DM endocrinology exam, like I did when Dr. Mithal was my examiner nearly 25 years ago, then also you get in trouble if you don't have those hormones. You can't answer correctly. So every now and then it helps. This is adaptive. But what is happening in modern India is it's 24/7. There is always some stress or the other. Now that we have understood it, the treatment is quite clear. First of all, bite only as much as you can chew. Every person is different. If you look at your neighbor or if you look at your colleague or competitor and then say, I am going to become like him or her, that is a short way to getting stressed and getting diseased. How do we come out of this? Multiple things. First of all, something known as coping skills training. Coping skills training. Learn how to cope. The first step is to avoid blaming anybody, blaming other people, is avoid getting into extreme thoughts like, I didn't get a particular prize or I didn't get a pay raise, so that means the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. It's just one day in your life of 100 years. Second step would be acceptance and optimism. Accept whatever is going on in life, whether it is diabetes or something else. How can we help other people? The answer is something known as psychological first aid. Now, let's say we were going on the road and suddenly there was a road traffic accident. We would run to help the victim. We would go out to offer first aid. Similarly, if you find someone around you who is stressed out, the least you can do is to offer psychological first aid. Psychological first aid just means establishing a compassionate presence besides that individual. So I, for example, have gained a lot from Dr. Mithal. So many times in my career, he has offered psychological first aid to me. He has just been there with me. Many times Dr. Mohan has been there with me in my career. And the fact that they've been there with me, that has helped me make decisions, bold decisions, which have, contributed to my growth. And similarly, you will find people around you who will benefit from the first aid that you will offer, and you in turn will benefit from them. So we can create that kind of an ecosystem in the country. Certainly, glucose levels will come down. And just one more fact, your choice of diet and exercise will also impact your stress. The concept is known as autonomic hygiene. Dr. Mohan talked about yoga trying to calm you down. So autonomic hygiene, and personally, I would suggest Kabaddi as the best sport in India. It helps you improve the sympathetic tone, that it keeps you fast and agile. It also helps you keep the parasympathetic tone because you have to keep on saying Kabaddi, Kabaddi, Kabaddi continuously. Try saying Om or Amin or Amen for a long period of time. All public speakers practice that. So someone like Dr. Mohan would be able to say Amin or Amen or Om for 60 seconds continuously without stopping his breath. So practice this and you will actually find your stress levels coming down. In the diet and the kitchen, reduce salt and spices. Please reduce salt and spices. You will actually find stress coming down.
Sanjay, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. Just listening to you was psychological first aid for all of us. So thank you so much, Dr. Sanjay. And because of paucity of time, we're going to be going into further questions. I had lots to ask you, but then let's go into further questions. At this point, Dr. Ambrish, how can technology and medical advancements assist in diabetic care?
So like every aspect of our lives, technology has made a big impact on diabetes, and what we are seeing is just the beginning, and much more lies ahead because the potential for technology to change the lives of people with diabetes and also those of doctors who care for people with diabetes is tremendous. So, there are various broad aspects. So one is in measurements, how do you measure glucose, for example? And there quite clearly technology has changed everything. I'll slip this in, when I was a resident doing my DMs at All India Institute, there was one glucometer in the whole institution and a big black thing. And I was the most chased guy because I was the only resident who had access to that glucometer, just from measuring blood glucose from fingertip. So now we are talking of very sophisticated glucometers, which we use all the time. A few seconds, very little, small drop, hardly any pain, no hassle. So number one, technology in that sense has improved, but it's gone much further. We are not satisfied with the measurements from fingertips. We want continuous monitoring to get an actual idea of what the person's glucose is through the day, whether the person is getting any low sugars that are going undetected or getting any spikes, again, which we can't figure out. So all those things are easily possible now. You have various kinds of devices. Some of the popular ones in India, they record for 15 days, they're put on the upper arm. You can use an app on the phone to get the reading, or you can use a reader. There are many ways to do that. But the fact is, you're getting a continuous tracing of your blood glucose throughout 24 hours. And that can be accessible to your doctor or healthcare provider. So quite clearly, this makes a big difference to the way it has made a big difference to my practice, that the way we now look at blood glucose patterns is very different. This is particularly true of type 1 diabetes, but also of complex or complicated type 2 diabetes, but increasingly of every diabetic. We are wanting to see the profile. In addition to what it does to us, it educates the patient, because many times patients believe, roti chawal is our basic. How can you say that just having white rice or roti will do anything to me? I mean, I've grown up on that. I've seen that. Moment they apply a device that tracks their blood glucose, is, oh my God, it's unbelievable. Everything is perfect. I had chicken at night, nothing happened. The day I have roti with it, it just spikes like. So what I'm saying is, it's self-education as well as better information, more precise information to help your doctor actually control your diabetes, adjust your medication, adjust your diet, as you yourself will be able to do. So that is continuous monitoring. And of course, in terms of delivery of care, technology like insulin pumps, for example. Even insulin delivery used to be one syringe and you fill it up and all those things. Now it's all syringes which are very fine needles, which have very fine needles and don't hurt at all. But much more than that are insulin pens, which are loaded with insulin, and you just aim and shoot and it's gone. And then after that, for a select category, as I mentioned, are insulin pumps. Insulin pumps are devices that have a reservoir for insulin and deliver insulin continuously in your system according to a pre-programmed state. So the doctor will help you program your state. Okay, this is the way the insulin should go in. When you're eating, you press this button, take this extra shot. So maybe he'll give you less insulin at night, more in the day, etc., But even there are a lot of advances, because now you have sensors linked to pumps, what is called a closed loop system. A sensor that measures blood glucose and a pump that adjusts its infusion rate according to that blood glucose is real now. I don't think it's perfect as yet, but it is huge. It's a huge advance. People are calling it artificial pancreas. Whether that is correct or not, I don't know. But undoubtedly, closed loop. And the last about technology, there's so many things. I could go on and on and on. But it's about the use of data, the use of big data. With AI and other tools, sometimes you don't know. We don't know what a particular drug is doing, what is the outcome. Now, those kind of things, moment we have a record keepings in order and data is accessible, you can crunch big data. You can crunch numbers to get answers. Oh, out of 10 lakh people who use this drug, 20,000 got heart attacks or something like that. So that kind of data will become very easy. Some things we cannot figure out by current tools. So I think this is the whole spectrum. And of course, with AI coming in, the field is endless and we are excited. It's a good time to be in this field actually.
Thank you, Dr. Ambrish. So advancements are helping us care for patients better and giving patients a lot of empowerment in terms of taking care of their health as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Ambrish. At this point, Dr. Mohan, what are the emotional aspects that we need to consider while living with diabetes? And what about sleep, something the Indians seem to be bad at?
Thank you. Then I think Dr. Sanjay already mentioned about the emotional aspect. We are increasingly becoming aware that social support is very important. Now, we don't have to go far. You see, if you look at the number of suicides among children of even people who do well, people who get into IITs and the big institutions are the best of the best, the creme de la creme. And yet, when they go there, because of the lack of emotional support, they're in a hostel for the first time, and suddenly they're finding everybody is as good as them. They thought they were the best, and suddenly they're among 50 people who are as good as them. And then the teachers are kind of forcing them to do even better. And so these things are all applicable to somebody with type 1 diabetes, for example. Or even type 2 diabetes, as was mentioned earlier, is no longer a disease of say 30, 40 years. Now we have children with type 2 diabetes. My youngest patient with type 2 diabetes is 7 years old. I have a few who are 10, 11, 12, even before puberty, they're getting type 2 diabetes. Of course, type 1 diabetes comes even much earlier. So a lot of emotional support is needed there. Leave them. Even if you look at adults, now you're telling a lady, for example, who's come with very severe uncontrolled diabetes and say, when did you last go for a walk? Oh, I don't go for a walk. I don't have time. And, I've got too many family commitments and I can't go. Now, if that lady has the support of the in-laws as well as her husband, who tells her, you look after your health, because that's going to decide the health of this whole family, because unless you're healthy, you're not going to help your children, you're not able to run the family. And that will mean that, she doesn't, I've heard, and in fact, this published in one of the journals recently, that this thing about the lady eating last, for example, in the family. Everybody eats, and if there's anything left, then she eats. And what will she get to eat? What everybody else is left off, So that's another kind of emotional support, saying you eat with us, and we want to see that you're eating healthy. The number of hours you sleep is very important. If you sleep less than 6 hours, or you sleep more than 8 hours, your diabetes rates are higher, heart attack rates are higher, your mortality is higher. You may say, why less than 6 hours? I can understand. 4 hours, 5 hours, you're sleep deprived. Why more than 8 hours? Now, if an human adult, usually if they sleep 6 to 8 hours is sufficient. If you need 10 and 11 hours of sleep as an adult, there's something wrong. There's some medical problem. Either you have a thyroid problem or some other problem or a heart problem or heart failure or something which is making you sleep too much. So the 6 to 8 hours we found had the lowest. If you draw a curve, it's like a U-shaped curve. The less than 6 hours mortality goes up, more than 8 hours mortality goes up. The bottom, the nadir, is for 6 to 8 hours. Then we looked at the time of sleep. When do people do best? At what time? We found they sleep between 10 p.m. and midnight, 12 midnight, they did the best. Now, if you sleep before 10, now 9 is okay. But if you start sleeping at 7 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the morning, in the evening, there's something wrong with you. Why do you have to sleep at 6 in the evening? There's something wrong. If you're forced to sleep, by the time you're so tired, there's some disease that you have. The other way around, of course, is much more common. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, you're still watching Netflix, you're watching this program, for example, at 3 o'clock. Don't watch this program at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Watch it much earlier. You may say, what about shift workers? Well, it is a problem. With shift workers, is an occupational hazard. You can't help that. But at least you make that your routine so that your body gets used to that particular routine. So sleep is very important. Quality of sleep is very important. The number of hours is important. And when you go to bed is also important. Very, very underdeveloped and understudied aspect of biology is chronobiology. Very closely linked to diabetes, metabolic diseases, and to heart disease.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohan. So much more to ask each one of you, but unfortunately, we are running out of time. So, I would love to ask just one question to each one of you, and that's related to your top tips when it comes to individuals with diabetes. So, Dr. Ambrish, could you help us understand what are your tips on living well with diabetes? And if you could just briefly touch upon how can somebody strike a balance, work-life balance, or what's the balance that they could have when it comes to diabetes?
I think it's important not to let conditions like diabetes overwhelm you. They are common conditions, and the key here is good control. If you're controlling your diabetes, your cholesterol, your blood pressure well, the ABC of diabetes control, you're actually going to live as healthy as the guy next to you who doesn't have diabetes. So I think it's important that we don't get overwhelmed by the diagnosis. At the same time, it's important that we don't deny it because we are feeling fine. We say there's nothing wrong with me. My sugars are just, it's just a number. Doctors are making it up. There's nothing like this, So all those things are important, but the basics are the same. We have to just change our eating habits. We need to get used to very light dinners. And some of the things I tell my patients, just drastically reduce your carbohydrate at dinner. Maida and refined carbs are poison for you. Fill your plate with veggies. Start with veggies first. If you can, of course, afford the right kind of veggies, make sure you start with veggies and then go on towards the end to a little bit of carb. You don't have to follow any crazy diet schedule. This diet schedule is for everybody. That's very important, Nuthan, for you to understand that, as mentioned earlier by my friends, it's very important that it's not that diabetes is some obscure disease and I'm into this kind of trap. No. Everyone in the family should follow that. You have to enjoy your food. So pick on the healthy food that you enjoy. Choose the exercise pattern that you enjoy. And to end, I will just quote one of the senior leaders of this country who's no more, who used to say, diabetes माने एक नया चश्मा जैसे लगता है. तो जैसे you put on a new pair of spectacles or glasses, or if you haven't put them on, you put them on for the first time, you have to get used to it. The angle, looking up, looking down, whatever. And actually, all you have to do is get adjusted to that. And then you can adjust with your diabetes also. So basically, it's about adjustments that we all made. And you can live a perfectly normal, healthy, and happy life despite having diabetes.
Simple positive adjustments. Thank you so much, Dr. Ambrish. I hope you have left some tips for the rest of the doctors here. Dr. Mohan, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to say is that, people come with obesity and diabetes. And when we tell them, let's say the person is 115 kilos in weight, and they are told that their ideal body weight is 60 or something, that means they have to lose 50% of their body weight. It's not going to happen. Even with bariatric surgery, they may not. So set yourself realistic goals. So what I tell people is, you're 115 kg, fine. First lose 5 kg. Let's see where you are. And then if that person has reached that, now let's try for another. It's like telling a child who has got 30 marks, if you get anything less than 100, you're no good. Next exam, child get 20. If you tell them first come to 50, let's see where you are. Not that 50 is a great mark, for that particular child, even 50 is a great one. Second tip that I'd like to say, not at all emphasized, is please go for your checkup. You have to go and meet your endocrinologist or diabetologist at least 3 times in a year. Because these changes which occur, let's say your HbA1c 3 months control should be 7%. Now, if you've gone above 7, and then you don't go for the checkup, 7 will become 8, 8 will become 9, 9 will become 10, and then it becomes that much difficult to bring it down. Similarly, your weight, if you've not been going for your checkup and your weight has gone up by 5 kilos instead of going down by 5 kilos, you will find that out after a year when it gets even more difficult. So the most important thing to have a long and healthy life, and many of my patients have completed 100 years of age and 101, 102 and still going strong, as Dr. Mithal said, despite having diabetes for 40, 50 years. The main trick, the main secret to the good health is regular checkup. And then, of course, all the other things which make common sense, diet, exercise, and so on, having a balanced life. Don't set yourself too tough a target because you'll never be able to achieve it. That lead to more depression and more anxiety.
Setting realistic goals and making sure that you go for your checkup. Dr. Sanjay, what are your favorite tips?
Nuthan, Lord Buddha said, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So you're living with diabetes. That's inevitable if you've got the disease. But suffering is optional. You do not need to suffer from diabetes. So please don't use that word. What do we do to get out of this suffering? Learn from the Bhagavad Gita. If there's a problem that you face, you accept it. Accept it with equipoise. Don't let the emotions overwhelm you. And then you just go into action mode. Give the best possible effort. What kind of effort should we put in? Very simple, very easy. E is for easy. Eat well and exercise well. Our experts have spoken about that. Eliminate unhealthy behaviors, maybe like substance abuse, prolonged sitting, and avoid extremes. Do not go to extremes. Extreme exercise, extreme diet, these will harm you. And keep emotional control over yourself. Emotional atyachar is something that you can practice upon yourself. Other people can practice upon you. Do not do that. Stay happy. And don't forget relaxation and sleep and entertainment. So such an easy way. Don't think of the word suffering at all. Accept your condition. Go into action mode. Eat and exercise well. Avoid extremes. Eliminate unhealthy behaviors. Keep emotional control over yourself. And remember the entertainment and sleep part.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanjay. That was beautifully put. And with that, we come to the conclusion of our discussion. So thank you so much, Dr. Ambrish. That was enlightening. Dr. Mohan and Dr. Sanjay, thank you so much. It was an absolute delight to have you here. On behalf of Times of India, I would like to thank each one of you for your time and for your insights. Let's hope that with such discussions, we can spread awareness and reduce the incidence of diabetes in future. Thank you so much.
Nuthan, Sanjay said that coming to the show would be a stress. It was not at all. The way you conducted it.
Very relaxed. Thank you.
Thank you.